That joke isn't funny anymore. Available on Amazon and everywhere. Hey guys, welcome back to the Lou Perez podcast. I'm your host, Lou Perez, and I'm very happy to be joined by Devon Eriksen. He's an author, and his latest book that's available right now, I think everywhere that you can get a book, is called Theft of Fire. And there it is. For those of you who have video, he's holding it up right now. So Devon, thank you so much for joining me.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me.
So I think I first, I guess, came across your work over Twitter or X, and it wasn't your sci-fi books. It was your commentary on everything that was happening in the world. And because of that, you became my favorite follow of the year 2023. And I just found you towards the end of the year, but you instantly became my favorite source of commentary on what's going on in the world. And I think the subject that got me that brought me in had to do with the estate tax, and how it seemed like there were a lot of millionaire and billionaire tech bros that were just talking about how great an idea it would be that once you die, for all of the wealth that you've accumulated to be taken by the state and redistributed, I guess, in some way that the tech bros want it. And you had some really choice words for those people.
Yes. I think there's sort of a trap in this region where IQs are high, but not too high. This sort of region where you can build a streaming website and have it take off, but you're not one of these once in a generation genius philosophers. Is that you start to look at the world as this kind of like a worksheet of math problems. Like, in elementary school, you were given worksheets of math problems and you were really good at solving them. And, the teacher patted you on the head whenever you did and told you you were a good boy. And so, some people grow up sort of looking at the world like that. Like, oh, I'm so smart. If I just look at the world and I come up with a scheme for making things better, and I get everybody to go along with it, then I will make things better and everybody will clap and cheer. And that's not the way humanity has progressed from banging the rocks together to recording podcasts that we can broadcast to people all over the world. The way we advance is to, as one person tries a little something and usually it fails, and every once in a while it succeeds, and then everybody imitates the guy who succeeded. So, that's great for building stuff. But when you start to get these ideas that, all your schemes are going to succeed because you're so magnificently smart, you say, okay, well, I don't want to try this in one little business or one little corner of civilization or start a colony in Antarctica. I'm going to take my communist nonsense straight to the federal government. And this is what we should all do because I, sitting here at my desk, have reasoned out that this will work. Well, you're insane. You're insane and you're dangerous, and people are scared of you because you have insane ideas and senators take your phone calls. So now when somebody dunks on you on Twitter, everybody goes, yeah, you need to shut the hell up because that's dangerous.
And I think that's one of the great things about Twitter is that you could have somebody who has been living in a very, privileged state. I'm sure they have a lot of yes men that are around them. A lot of people who probably allow them to forget about any failed ventures because, I guess one of the things about like venture capital is like there's a lot of things that fail, but you remember the ones that really that take off.
Survivorship bias. The thing about Emmett Shear is I think that, like most of these sort of multi-millionaire, billionaire types, they're mostly surrounded by people who are exactly like them and people whose paycheck depends on them.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a very rare and perhaps valuable thing for someone to come along to these people and say, no, you dumbass.
And that's what's great is that you can do it where, the reality is where you have, very elite people having ongoing conversations on Twitter with someone called like Cat Turd.
Mm-hmm.
That's pretty amazing. And part of that, I wonder, it's like why they would even kind of put themselves in that position. Or is it, are they just learning? Yeah.
Because they're completely unused to being outside this bubble. And, when someone speaks to you, the impulse is to speak back. And then after a while, people start to realize that, how someone interacts says something about them. So, there will be some people who will go, oh, I'm too elite to talk to you. I'm too rich to talk to you. I'm too important to talk to you. I'm going to make 15-second snarky remarks on my phone, or I'm just going to block you, or I'm going to limit replies to people I mentioned or people I follow. But people notice that. The lack of a conversation is in and of itself, well, I should say, the refusal to engage in conversation is in and of itself a message. And ultimately, both billionaires and governments rely on other people's perception of them to get what they want. By yourself, you're just some guy making up things about what other people should do. If you don't have that social power, if you don't have that respect, then your position and your money are meaningless because you can't get what you want. So ultimately, I think people have to engage in these conversations. And I think that with the one-to-many media of radio and television being replaced with the many-to-many media of the internet, we're exiting the age where you can wield power by deception, because you can no longer control these central nodes of information. There is no central node of information. So we're starting to enter, and I'm very hopeful about this, we're starting to enter this age where you have to wield power by persuasion. And I think that these kinds of many-to-many platforms like Twitter are sort of the beginning of that.
I took part in a debate. There were the two groups. It was Braver Angels, and the other one was the Young Republican Club of New York, and it took place in the Village at the Comedy Cellar in New York City. And I was sort of like a last minute addition to it. It's like, and the resolution was mainstream media is a threat to democracy. And I had to argue that it was. And I was like, okay, I guess I'll come up with, I'll talk about how the media has, distorted information, outright lied, led us astray, et cetera, and how that's bad for democracy. But I was sort of, I kind of wanted to argue that mainstream media is not a threat to democracy because it's no longer really mainstream. That it's sort of its influence has shrunk so much over the years, where you have a lot of independent alternative media that's able to call out the the BS, sort of call into question.
CNN plays mostly on mute to busy airports.
Yeah, exactly. And that was one of the examples that I used where they had to they paid out some unknown but probably ungodly sum of money to Nicholas Sandman, the high school student who had the nerve to smirk in the face of a guy.
Yeah.
but with that, with it, I really, so you as an author, as someone who's writing fiction, I feel like you probably have to like have a nice balance of what's happening in the culture, and also not lose sight of what humanity has been since our beginning, and what makes us human, and how we're interacting with the world that we're given, we're creating.
Yeah. Well, history has only one arrow.
Mhm.
The arrow of history is technology. Yeah, human nature remains sort of the same. And if you have the same inputs, you're going to get the same results. But the reason the landscape permanently changes is technology. And, everything we think of as a social change or social progress or an evolving philosophy or attitude can generally be traced to some piece of technology. You can trace democracy to the rifled firearm. You can trace feminism to various home appliances. And, you can, bad or good, you can generally trace any sort of social change to a technological change. So, as a science fiction writer, what I do is I think about, okay, what is the future technology going to be? How are people going to adapt their social systems to this technology?
And in your case, what is that future technology? Like what sort of where are we heading?
Well,
without giving too much away,
yes,
I don't know spoilers. So
in Theft of Fire, the first of the Orbital Space series, because an agent is giving me dirty looks over there for not holding it up every 5 seconds, I kind of focused on 3 areas that I thought were very exciting technological futures. And I wanted to focus on all 3 of them because too many science fiction books have this one idea and they want to ignore all the other things that might happen in the future. So I focused on space flight and the colonization of the solar system. I focused on biotech reaching the point where we stop just manipulating our environment and other species and start manipulating our own genome. Who do we want to be? And I focused on artificial intelligence, both in terms of the artificial intelligence we have today, which is these sort of large language models and search tools using heuristics to do various tasks like drive a car, and the sort of extremely elusive sort of true AI, where can we create a piece of software that is a sentient being and is it in some ways is a person the way a human is a person.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, well, if we sort of take each of those, when it comes to space flight and colonization, are you looking to get out of here, or are you looking to stay grounded in your own personal life?
Oh, my personal life. Well, I don't know how much we'll do in my lifetime, but it would be interesting to get out there. But what would be more interesting is to live in a world where this is happening, because I think a lot of people don't really understand the impetus behind space flight. Okay. No.
Is that book coming up again?
Now is not. Well, the book is being attacked by a kitten.
Okay.
Now is not kitten.
That's the cutest kind of attack that you could possibly be a victim
of. Where was I? Oh, yes. Space colonization. I think a lot of people don't really fully understand the impetus behind it, saying, well, why would we want to go to Mars? What is there? They don't fully understand that we live on this tiny speck of dust, and there's an entire rest of the universe. And the way that our technology stack grows, the way that we do stuff since we were banging the rocks together, is we take things from the environment, we manipulate them with knowledge and skill, and we turn them into useful stuff. And right now, a lot of our ability to do that, which is the essential function of what humans do, is bottlenecked by the fact that we live in this extremely resource-impoverished environment called Earth. And it doesn't sound like, oh, wait, extremely resource-impoverished? What are you talking about? Well, I'm talking about compared to the rest of the solar system. A gravity well, like you have on a planet, whether you have planet's gravitational field, is literally a giant pit. And all the heavy stuff, which means all the interesting elements like iron and heavy metals and uranium and rare earth metals, tends to sink to the bottom. So most of the really neat stuff in the earth, as far as elements go, is at the core. And we're just kind of scraping out the little tiny remnants that didn't manage to sink. And that is a big sort of gating mechanism on our ability to create technology. I mean, look what we have to go through to make batteries.
I was going to say the Congo. For example,
look what we have to go to create electronics. So if you go elsewhere in the system, there's a whole bunch of rocks flying around that don't have big gravity wells. And all the interesting stuff is right there at the surface. And there's one scene, which I can say this without giving too much away, where a character is loading a rifle and the bullets are made of gold. And this is completely ordinary. Like, gold is stuff we make bullets out of now.
that is Ron Paul's dream right there.
Because, all of these things that we use that we have to spend so much effort scraping out of the earth, there are entire chunks of it just floating around in the solar system. There's one asteroid, and I forget the name. I did my research on this, but I have it written down somewhere. It's some number of quintillion dollars worth of materials in today's market. Now, of course, if you do a Holtzman transfer and you move this thing into Earth orbit and you start mining it,
doesn't the value go down?
You don't get, $57 quintillion or whatever. Mm-hmm. But what you get is that the market price for all of these metals and metalloids crashes. And now it's dirt cheap to make things. And so, the two expenses you have in terms of materials are energy. So we need to be building nuclear reactors and working on a fusion, and materials. So we need to be mining asteroids. So it's not just about, I want to go out there and see Mars, this exploratory or this tourist impulse, because a lot of us have it, but not everybody does. It's, I want to live in a world where the solar system has been conquered and these resources are being exploited. Because if you thought the first industrial revolution made some cool stuff, wait till you see the second.
Yeah, that's really interesting because, I think when a lot of people think about gold, they think about a kind of a superficial value to it, like, oh, a gold chain or gold rings, as opposed to, no, like as a material in engineering, like it's actually really a great material. It's like copper wiring is when I moved into my house about 3 years ago, and we basically redid all of the plumbing and the amount of copper that was that was changed, that we changed out a lot of the old stuff. There was it used to be like iron. I forget what they call the exact iron, but there were pipes. Basically, you could like crumble them with your hands.
Yeah, those old black iron pipes.
Yeah, just
they don't hold up too well.
They don't hold up too well as compared to like a PVC, the industrialized plastic that we used and the copper wiring. So it's like this stuff has value not just because like, oh, it looks pretty, but also because it just functions really well.
Yeah. We use almost the entire periodic table of elements in our various technological processes. And there are some of them that are quite scarce. And so getting out there, is going to Mars. A lot of it is really about supporting asteroid mining. And it's about having a place where people can live because there's gravity and you can grow things. But at the same time, the escape velocity is absurdly low. So you can cheaply launch manufactured things to orbit. I think what a lot of people don't understand about space travel is that travel in space, once you are in what we would consider space, is not really terrifically expensive or difficult compared to getting out of Earth's gravity well. So it is of a big economic, material, technological benefit to have this planet where you can create permanent habitats there, but the escape velocity is very low. And then you can send things to Earth because sending things to Earth is cheap. Taking things off Earth is expensive.
Yeah, I'm thinking about what the FedEx charge would be. Sending something to Mars versus getting something
sending
back.
a single kilogram to orbit can cost tens of thousands of dollars now. And some people are doing some really, really sterling work on reducing that, but we need to keep going.
Yeah, it's so interesting because you brought up nuclear before, and for years I've become just a very big proponent of nuclear, and it's wild that here's a technology that it is at least 60 years old, or at least I don't know when
very mature.
I don't know when the first reactor was built, and I've read the work of like Michael Schellenberger, who's written about nuclear, and it's like here you have this source of energy that will dramatically just change humanity for the better, and cheap, reliable energy, but yet the Greens and the environmentalists, they don't want it. And it's almost like, do you not want it because it works? Because that seems to be part of it.
Well, one of humanity's biggest problems is that some of us aren't actually all that bright. And a lot of the difficulty in creating civilization is, what do you do with these people? And democracy, as a consequence of the firearm, has been nice for us in certain ways, but then the problem is that these people vote, and their vote weighs as much as not only someone who knows about things, but also as someone who weighs as much as the vote of someone who has skin in the game. And it can be very difficult to develop the technologies that make everyone's life better when you are continuously having to ask permission from people who can't do basic algebra or can't understand the concept of per capita. That's a big challenge. So, a lot of people, their thinking does not go beyond hearing the word nuclear and getting scared. So I would like to propose that we replace our nuclear reactors with radiothermal steam generators. generators.
Whoa, I like that
And
sound.
what a radiothermal steam generator does is it takes a bunch of rocks that you find in nature that get hot all by themselves, and you put a bunch of them together with some absorbent material that you can sort of push in and out that controls how hot the rocks get. And then you put water on that, and you make steam, and you run a turbine. And you call this a radiothermal steam plant, which is far superior to those dangerous old nuclear plants.
I love it. Let's market it. Let's do it. Let's do it. And I bet there's
radiothermal steam generation.
Yeah. And I bet there's a little bit of waste that could be stored on site. You don't have to worry about it.
The waste, if these hot rocks get old and they don't get as hot anymore as you can't use them, those rocks don't gain in volume. They're the same size they always were. So you just encase them in concrete and leave them right where they were. They were found in nature to begin with.
They're natural.
You took them to another place.
Organic.
Now they're there. You just embed them in concrete and you leave them alone, and you're fine.
Yeah.
Which is much safer than having nuclear waste, which, as we learned from watching The Simpsons, is a glowing green liquid substance that is stored in leaky steel barrels.
Yeah, that's right. So
down with the leaky steel barrels. More radiothermal steam generation.
There we go. So you have a background in engineering. What kind of engineering?
Mostly software. Did a little electrical, hardware, electronic engineering as well.
Nice. So one of the other themes you were talking about is biotech, and yes. Kind of what we were talking about earlier. These kind of very rich tech bros. I wonder if sort of their philosophy of just getting rid of putting together like an estate tax, just taking the wealth of everyone who dies. I wonder if part of them is like, well, by the time that'll have an effect, we will figure it out. Like the singularity would have hit. I'll just be a consciousness beamed up into the cloud. I won't even need my body or quote unquote wealth. There'll be some play, some way to get around the system. What are your thoughts on kind of biohackers and that sort of thing?
Well, again, I talked about these kinds of grand schemes, and the problem with the grandiosity of the schemes is when people sort of reach out for the power of government to implement them. So it's good to take risks, but what's important is where you put your risks. See, we have a somewhat capitalist system, not completely capitalist, but sort of capitalism adjacent. And this has lifted the majority of the world's population out of poverty for the first time in history. But the way that capitalism works is you do radical stuff all the time, but you do it off in your little corner with whatever money you can raise, and you are allowed to fail. We hope that you fail because that, okay, now we've eliminated a bad idea. Now we know not to do that. But the problem with these schemes is not the radical scheme, let's try to build a reusable rocket booster, or, let's try to synthesize meat using biotech, or any of these other things, let's inject myself with a whole bunch of experimental substances and stem cells from my son so that I can make myself a human guinea pig for researching life extension. All that stuff is great. Imagine if Brian Johnson succeeds in what he's doing. Imagine the benefit to humanity as a whole. And the sacrifice of using yourself as a guinea pig to do this, I mean, wow, that's cool.
Yeah.
What's not cool is when somebody has one of these radical ideas and they go to the government and say, let's make this mandatory and have everyone everywhere do this all the time. You know, everybody has to take our experimental thing that's supposed to be a substitute for a vaccine because we are the very smart people and we have said that it works and it totally doesn't cause 20-year-olds to keel over from heart trouble. So, you know, the problem is everyone marching in the same direction. You don't want that. You want this capitalist notion of everyone marching in different directions and trying different things, and you discover where the value is. So that's the difference between let's inject myself with a whole bunch of experimental shit to see if we can live longer, and let's inject everybody with this thing that we came up with, or let's take away everybody's inheritance. You know, like, bro, if you want to play with experiments on wealth distribution and what does that do to society? Well, bro, you've got $500 million. Buy a metric fuck ton of land in Wyoming or somewhere where they'll leave you alone and start a voluntary city where you do wealth redistribution between anybody who comes along, and you create your little experimental society, and we see how it goes. You know, show me the experimental results before you talk to me about policy. So that's what I think the difference is. So when these sort of billionaire types do stuff with their own money and experiment with creating things that they think would be good, I cheer. When they call up senators, then I have to get on Twitter and nuke them from orbit.
Yeah. My good friend, Gene Epstein, he runs a debate series called the Soho Forum. Mm-hmm. And Gene is a well-known libertarian, and he's debated at least 3 avowed socialists / communists for the series.
And statists. They're all statists.
Yes. And he's absolutely crushed them. Like at a birthday celebration, I said that, the only one who's killed more socialists is Stalin. Like he just wipes the floor. He does a great job. Okay. And one of the things that he always brings up is, he's like, go and do it. In this system, as imperfect as it is, go and build a version of the world that you want and see if it works out. And if it's better, people will go that way, whether it's a business, whether it's a town, a collective. They never seem to do that, to put some skin in the game.
Prove to me that your system is suitable for running a small sandwich shop before we have a revolution to make it run the world.
Yeah, there's an academic, Richard Wolff. I don't know if you've come across his stuff.
Doesn't sound familiar.
So he had a recent video that went viral. He was basically the question was, in his socialist, communist world.
Oh, yes, I saw this.
Yeah. What would how would a worker go about getting a PlayStation?
A PlayStation, yeah.
Would you be able, would that, would you be able to do it? And he was
to assume that PlayStations would exist.
Exactly. And, you thought like, oh, something like this, that would be a layup for the, this a perfect world. Yeah. And, I recommend everyone go and check out his answer, but it was something along the lines of like, you need to basically petition, not your boss. I don't know who you would call it, but like the head of the work. You'd have to petition all of the workers, that your fellow workers.
You have a conversation with the collective.
And you need to, make your case. Well, why you should have this PlayStation. Yeah. And then they get to vote. They get to vote upon it.
Yeah.
And, it's I'm very happy that exists for people to actually check out because he's often been the go-to guy with people making these arguments. And years back, I saw another clip of his that I haven't been able to track down, but it was a similar question in that, in his, organized society, how would you run a restaurant and a worker-owned collective restaurant? And he said, well, one day you're the cook, and then the next day you're front of house, you're the host, and then the next day you're a waiter, and the next, just like, oh, this, this,
humans are fungible.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, man, the dude has definitely never owned a restaurant. I'm doubtful he ever worked in a restaurant, and even more doubtful, I don't even know if he's ever eaten in a restaurant. Yeah. To think that that's how a functioning restaurant could be.
Sounds like someone who went straight from public school into academia without ever having a real job, much less running a business. And, I actually, now that you remind me what this clip was with the PlayStation, I actually did see this at the time. And my comment was that that socialism does not eliminate hierarchies. It replaces hierarchies of wealth with hierarchies of political and social influence. And, this was what we saw in the Soviet Union. Someone who wins discussions about PlayStations and whatnot is the person who is socially well connected, is the person who knows people, is the person who is able to sway public opinion, is the person who is connected to other people in power. And this upward mobility in this kind of system is vastly more difficult than it is in a system which is tracked through money. Because money is just a technology we use to measure fucks given. Someone spends money when they give a fuck about something. If they're not willing to spend their own money on it, they don't give a fuck. So it's very easy for someone to advance in a money-based system compared to other systems. It's still not easy, but it's more easy because all you have to do is do something that a lot of people give a fuck about, like write a book.
Which is a perfect opportunity for you to pick up that book again one more time. We're doing it, Devon.
Now you're doing my agent's job for her.
Theft of fire, ladies and gentlemen.
Theft of fire. Or create a technology that people care about. Make an electric car that people actually want to drive instead of some embarrassing hippie mobile. And all that's difficult, but you can become influential by doing things that people give a fuck about. And that's a pretty good system because, when people do positive things that we care about, we want them to have more influence.
Yeah.
And that is vastly easier. And it is vastly easier for talent and merit to rise in a money-based system than in this kind of voting-based sort of workers' collective system where everything is politicized and every issue down to, how many bags of potato chips you can get from the grocery store is subjected to some kind of political process.
Yeah. Yeah. And when I look at all of the, big decisions that I've made in my life, I never thought like, that it would have been a lot better if I just put these up to a vote to complete strangers who don't know me and have made awful decisions in their own lives.
Yeah.
Speaking about books, we've been talking about your latest is Theft of Fire, and is that available? So it's available on Amazon. Is it available?
It's available pretty much wherever books are sold. You can even go into Barnes and Noble and special order it. But all your major ebook platforms, you can download DRM free copies from Smashwords. I can't even list all the places, but if you just do a web search for Theft of Fire, you'll find a lot of
Nice.
You'll find it for sale in a lot of different venues. We popped up in a library in Stockholm the other day.
That's great.
We kind of look across the internet to see what libraries we're in, because I was very influenced by science fiction classics and libraries when I was growing up. So
very cool. My book, That Joke Isn't Funny Anymore, came out in September of 2022. And it's available online, and there's an audio book and all that. But there is something really special about seeing your book in a bookstore. And I know people don't frequent bookstores as much as they used to, but there's something really cool. Just, it's like, oh, there's my book, and there are the plays of Shakespeare, and and
for
somehow,
me, it's libraries. For me, it's libraries and readers sending me snapshots of their bookshelves, where I'm next to Larry Niven or somebody. That's cool.
That's cool. That's really cool. And so with the what was the process like? And I'm not going to ask like, oh, where did you get the idea and all that.
Yeah.
But I mean, the process of writing the book. Like, how do you decide? Like, okay, this is when I'm starting it. This is how I'm finishing it and producing it and all that.
Well, everyone has to find their own writing process. The way I put it is that no one can tell you how to write. They can only tell you how they write. Mm-hmm. Because writing is about taking what is in your head and putting it out in a way that it can go into other people's heads. And so everybody's head is a little bit different. So your writing process has to work with the way that your head is organized. And for me, when I was a software engineer, I did a fair amount of nonfiction writing. And I would write like little scenes and vignettes and stuff every once in a while, because I like to do that, little writing prompt stuff on the internet. But I could never really assemble that into a complete long story. And then I found a series of lectures recorded at Brigham Young University by a fantasy author, Brandon Sanderson. He's fairly successful. A lot of people have heard of him. And the way he talked about stories kind of made sense. And I go, I can do that. And I sat down and started writing. And what my writing process ended up being was maybe a little bit different than his, but it kind of got me thinking about a writing process that worked for me. Because a lot of writers will give you terrible, terrible advice because it works for them. If you they might say, well, don't write unless you love to write.
That sounds like the worst fucking advice.
Terrible advice. Terrible advice. Because nobody loves to write.
Oh, dude, there's
a pain in the ass.
I procrastinate. I put off writing and put it off until I have no choice.
What sustains you is not the love of writing; it's the love of your story.
Yeah,
it's the love of your subject matter. But there's some weirdo out there who loves writing, and maybe he said that once, and everybody repeats it, and everybody claps like trained seals. So you get a lot of that sort of advice, and depending on the different authors you listen to, it could be different advice. It could be like snort a lot of cocaine and write whatever pops into your head. That worked for one guy.
Yeah. Although I don't know how much, I don't know the price of cocaine, but it might be like, you might be putting yourself in debt even before the thing's,
Oh, well, yeah, he's made a lot of money. He can afford all the cocaine he wants.
Yeah. If we're talking about the same guy, I've definitely seen, I've seen him a lot on Twitter, doing his thing.
Yes. Well, that's his substitute for cocaine. Now that he's quit the cocaine, that's his substitute.
Now I'm just imagining every tweet is just a rail that he hasn't done.
Yeah, it's that same dopamine hit. But the trick, if you really want to be a writer, is to find that process, your version of the writing process. And then you will be able to actually start and then do the middle and then finish. And my writing process ended up looking a lot like software engineering. I make a spec. I use source control. I do branching and merging. I have unit tests. I have function contracts. This is
all language I have no clue.
Some of your readers will understand. Cool. Some of your listeners will understand this. Yeah. Those who have a software background themselves. But, software is basically you're collaboratively writing a lot of text files in this formal language that computer instructions are written in. And, a novel is just a bunch of language that you work on. So I use the same tools and processes, and it actually works out pretty well.
Have you found yourself, since you've been active on Twitter, is that taking away from time that you would be spending on the next book, or even doing more stuff with this book?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, but publicity is a problem and discoverability is a problem that every author has to solve.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because it's not enough to just produce something that people will love. They don't know it exists. Mm-hmm. You have to make them know that it exists. So right now I have to balance my time between creating a public persona and working on the next book. And that's just the reality of how it is. Because if you want to be successful as an author, you have to swing for the fences. Most authors do not make enough to support themselves doing this as a full-time job, much less actually become well-known and hopefully wealthy. And all of the money is concentrated at the top. So it doesn't make sense to get into a writing career unless you are really swinging for the fences. And in order to do that, you have to produce something that really resonates with people, but then you have to find ways to make them aware of that. One of the things I say is that as an author, I am not in the book selling business. I am in the business of building a brand. Mm-hmm. If I build a brand that has audience recognition and has the trust of people who recognize that brand, well, if I pay attention to him, that attention is going to be rewarded. Then the books will sell themselves. Then the book selling part is easy. And, whatever other swag you can come up with to sell to people who like your stuff and want to buy from you. But the real effort is building that brand, building that name recognition, building that public trust. Because when you're selling an ebook for $10, that's not a lot of money. It's really not. It's not a big ask. People will part with $10 for parking. So people's reluctance to pick up a book by a new author has nothing to do with the $10 or $20 you're going to charge them. It has to do with the 10 or 20 hours they're going to be investing in reading, in consuming what you've produced. It takes effort and time and focus and concentration to read a book. And they want to know, is this going to be a rewarding experience or is this going to be disappointing? And that's where the brand building comes in. Because if I get on Twitter and I say stuff and people go, that makes sense. Or, that's a way to articulate something that had been frustrating me or had occurred to me for some time now. And now there's a way of saying this where I can make sense of it. If you do that, then people start to think, maybe this guy can write. Maybe I want to see what he can do with some fiction. Maybe this won't be a waste of my time. So that's my marketing method. And that means I have to be out there sort of sharing my thoughts, not every day, but most days. And that continues to drive book sales, and then hopefully drives sales of the next book, and starts building that brand into wider audience awareness. Because right now I have some absolutely rabid fans, and that they are the best people. They are awesome. Every author says that, but they're all wrong. So I have the best fans.
Your fans have bullets made of gold. I know
They
that.
do.
Yeah.
They do.
So yeah, something that it's the time commitment that goes into not only on your end writing the book, but also as a oh, sorry, there's some yelling happening right there. I might cut this part. We'll see. Yeah, I'm gonna give it 5 seconds. 5,
Okay.
4, 3, 2, 1. So not only is writing a book a big, time commitment and an investment, but as a reader, you're investing, like you said, 10 to 20 hours into a book when you have so much that you could be doing.
And it's an effort.
Right.
It's not just the time, it's the effort, because you can sit there on the couch and watch a movie and be basically in a vegetative state. And you can scroll on social media and consume these little tiny potato chips of entertainment, and they're very, very low effort. But when you read a fiction book, it's like somebody's given you a script and you're making the movie in your head. So it takes real concentration and effort.
Yeah, and with that, have you turned any of your books or optioned any of your books to be movies or TV shows or anything like that happen?
Well, I don't sell rights. I've seen what Amazon did to Robert Jordan. I've seen what HBO did to George Martin. I've seen what Netflix did to Cowboy Bebop. And I do not sell rights. So if I ever make it to the screen, it's going to be because tools have gotten better and I've raised some money and I can hire my own experts and be my own showrunner. And that's not as unrealistic as it sounds, because Hollywood is starting to crack. And we are starting to see that these $300 million budgets are mostly finding their way from investors' pockets into, into graft and corruption. And, we saw Godzilla -1. Yeah, wonderful film, by the way. Go and see it. It's not just another stupid monster flick. It's a real story. We saw that made for $16 million, and it made like 120.
Wait, it was made for. I haven't seen the movie yet, but I've heard a lot of people sing the praise. $16 million. That sounds insane.
And it looks like a Hollywood sort of blockbuster film. Maybe there's a little something you can spot here and there, but it looks really, really good. And the story is there. The characters are there. All the motivations are believable. This thing really scans. And so that's an indicator of what you can do. And that's, before, 2-3 years in the future, when some of these AI tools to help artists and to help visual effects guys and whatnot get better. So I think that is the route that I will be pursuing if I eventually build enough of a brand to be able to make it to the screen. In the meantime, as an intermediate step, I am making it to an audiobook version. Yeah. And that is not as simple as me reading the book onto tape.
Oh, you don't have to make your voice any deeper. It's already deep enough, Devon.
It is. I have recruited 3 very talented actors, and I am super excited about what they can do with the characters. I've already done some work directing them, They're amazing. We've had some amazing results. The Kickstarter for this will be launching very soon.
Oh, great.
And hopefully soon after that, the full cast audiobook will follow. And I'm really excited about that because it not only gets it in front of new readers, you know, it adds a certain depth.
It becomes its own. It becomes its own thing. Like where you have the
its
book.
own thing. It becomes its own thing.
Yeah.
And you know, I have a certain amount of fans who are influential in the trucking industry, and truckers love their audiobooks. And I would prefer truckers to love their audiobooks rather than to read, because I want them watching the road.
Yeah, and you want them getting those books delivered to where this supposed to go.
Yeah, you know, those guys, their lives are tough enough. I want to give them some good entertainment while they're out there away from their families.
Well, if there are any roles that require a stereotypical Latino accent, I'm more than happy to oblige. I have a history of doing that in my work.
Thank you, but the casting decisions are already made.
Speaking of audiobooks, you posted something recently on Twitter, on X, in regards to Audible and basically how much money there is in selling audiobooks and how Audible makes a decision as far as you know, what's a free one and what people have to pay for. Maybe you could talk about that just a little bit.
Well, Audible has been very successful in the audiobook business by being first to market and by realizing that authors don't have a lot of negotiating power, because it's this vast cloud of small independent people who collectively we have a lot of value, but as individuals, not so much. So they seem to have realized that if they can negotiate with us as individuals, they can divide and conquer. And sort of their basic deal is, you know, if you spend your own money producing your audiobook, you know, you invest all the dollars, then, and you agree to be exclusive with them and not sell anywhere else, including your own website, then they will graciously consent to take a majority of the sales proceeds, 60-40, they're in their favor, but they're going to set the price. You're not going to set the price of your own product. They're just going to set the price, and then they'll give you some percentage of that, because they have a list price, but they don't sell for that. They're going to do this credit system whereby they can obscure the price. And it basically just boils down to, you'll take whatever we give you, whatever we decide to give you from day to day. And then if you don't want to go exclusive with them, the split becomes 80-20. Well, 80-20 of what? Whatever they decide, because they set the price. So, you know, and they control a certain, not an overwhelming majority, but a significant majority of the audiobook market. So I decided that I am not an agreeable guy. I am not a nice guy. I do not kiss the ring. I will not be on Audible. No Audible. And that's going to cost me some sales. But, you know, a very, very successful writer of my acquaintance, who I will not name, but he does about 6 figures a month in book sales.
It's not bad. Not bad.
Yeah. You know, he has this whole organization with several employees, and he says that he's moving away from Audible to selling off his own website, his own channels. And he says that he has to sell about 10 audiobooks on Audible to make what he makes off one audiobook sale on his own website. So even if his sales fall by 90% by removing himself from Audible, he still does better because he would make the same amount of money. And then there would be 90 people out of every 100 who hadn't bought the book yet, but they might in the future. So that means for me that Audible is a non-starter. You know, there was a push to sort of, well, maybe some big name authors can push back against Audible, and they can sort of start a movement to collectively bargain with Audible. And unfortunately, the one who stepped up was Brandon Sanderson. Now, Brandon is a great guy. Everybody who knows him says he is a great guy. And everybody who knows him says that he is a super nice guy. And that's the problem. He's a super nice guy. You don't want a super nice guy for this. You want a sociopathic, front-stabbing rat bastard who is willing to negotiate and play hardball. And so what happened was Audible made some token concessions, which we still haven't found out what they are. And Sanderson agreed to go back on their platform. So currently, we don't really have a strong champion in the fight against Audible, but I'm hoping that I can be successful with the audiobook anyway and inspire other authors to bypass them. And maybe, hopefully, that does some small bit to begin to undermine Audible, because I don't think Audible is going to change. I don't think they can change. I think that the massive profits they make off their business, all of that money has found a home somewhere. It's somebody's salary. It's somebody's investment. And so they are going to face, even if they wanted to change, they would face huge amounts of internal resistance against any real change. But if they continue to dominate the market, they will strangle it, because they will make it increasingly impossible to make a living as an author. And then you get this situation where the next Tolkien, the next Heinlein is, you know, he's going to go back to selling RV insurance or whatever it was he was doing before, because he can't make a living for long enough to break out and become famous.
Yeah. Well, as an author who's on Audible, if anybody's out there, I know you get that free credit. You know, if you enjoy the book, if you listen to it, please pay afterwards. You know, so throw me at least do that. I would say.
Well, I'm going to step in and, as politely as possible, try to argue with you here.
Okay.
I would like to encourage you to not be on Audible, because when you are you exclusive with them?
Oh, it's through my publisher. So
okay,
yeah.
So probably,
I don't have any legs.
You know, when you the next one, that's not your decision.
Right. Maybe the next time.
I would like to encourage you to avoid that in the future, because if you go through them, you're just paying them more money and increasing their market share and their hold on the market. And I know it's difficult to take a stand on principle when you don't know if it's going to hit you in the pocketbook or not. But this has to start somewhere. And, you know, I'm doing it. I'm putting my money where my mouth is. And I'd like to encourage other authors to do the same. You know, I'm not going to yell at them if they don't, but I'm asking.
There we go. Well, Devon Eriksen, if you want to hold up that book one more time, Theft of Fire. Right there, it's the hardcover version. I believe there's a paperback, a Kindle version. Yes. And as the man told you, he is producing an audio version of the book. And I wish him much success. And Devon, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast. I know my fans are definitely going to love you. They're going to love this conversation.
Well, thank you for having me on. I always love these conversations and seeing where they go and getting to reach out to people.